1029 Hot Tomato with Moira and Big Trev, live and local for the drive home. If you missed the first part of our chat yesterday with Paul MacNamara, you can catch up on iHeartRadio. He's written a book called The Criminal Class, which is out now. It's about his time as a teacher in a prison in Sydney.
Now, apparently you've got some amazing stories in this book. One about a retired gardener who was wearing faded green T-shirt and shorts. Tell us about him.
Yeah, so I write about in the book that there was a guy who was wearing green, an old fella, and he was doing some gardening in his backyard, and then he had to go to the next door where the park was to cut a few branches off his lemon tree. And the prisoners were doing community service there. And when the prison guards, they just rounded up everybody who was wearing green, and this fella got put in the van with the rest of them. And it wasn't until they got back and did the head count that instead of, the officer said, I'm used to if there was one down but not one extra.
Yeah. I wonder how many guys put their hands up and go, yeah, mate, I'm not supposed to be here.
Yeah, no, neither me either.
Yeah. Well, that's a part I write about in the book too, because in the van, the guy's protesting and saying, I'm not supposed to be here, and
really?
everyone else starts saying, yeah, I'm innocent. I'm innocent.
What lessons have you learned from some of the prisoners that you were teaching in there?
Yeah, well, I know that they've got ways of getting razor blades to attach to wires and then put that into the power point, and they can boil water and make a cup of tea. So they get pretty creative. In the education section, one thing they were always after was pens, because they'd fashion those into syringes as well, so they were sort of in high demand. So
really?
we had, we used to have inventories where, if you give a pen out, you got to get a pen back, and, you didn't want anything to go missing.
Yeah.
Wow.
So there's a lot of crafty things going on like that.
Yeah.
You give out 14 pens and you get 14 crayons back and go, no.
Yeah, then you know something's wrong, yeah.
Do you get much gratitude from some of the prisoners, like after lessons and stuff?
It was strange, really, because education was sort of like a refuge for them. They'd get out of their cell, they'd get off the yard, they could get away from, a lot of the intimidation and whatever else goes on up there. So they were glad to be there, and as I said, some people actually did want to learn things, which was good.
Yeah.
And so, they didn't see us as, the guards were the punishers.
Yeah.
And we were the educators. So, we weren't the bad guys, but we still had to play by the rules. And, there were restrictions, and, there's something called officer shopping, which is when they come up to you and they may ask you for a pen or a piece of paper, and they're just trying to work their way in to see if you're someone that they can manipulate.
Okay.
Oh.
Yeah, so, while I was working there were people who, some guy was bringing into one jail alcohol in water bottles, so you just had like your normal water bottle, but it'd be full of gin or vodka or something.
Wow.
And, people had manipulated him to that point that they could get that.
So he was an educator. He was not
he actually was a guard.
Wow.
But when they get to know you, then they might say threaten you or threaten your family.
Yep.
And so you had to not disclose anything about yourself, really.
Yeah, definitely, because that can be used against you.
It's called The Criminal Class, the book by Paul MacNamara, and it's out now if you want to grab it. Gold Coast 1029 Hot Tomato with Moira and Big Trev, live and local for the drive home. And the last few days we've been bringing you our chat with Paul MacNamara, who's an author. He was a teacher in prison, so teaching the inmates, and he's got a book out called The Criminal Class. If you missed the first couple of bits, you can catch up on iHeartRadio. But this one here, I reckon we've saved the best till last.
There are different and quite strange and odd ways that people have tried to get contraband into these jails.
Yeah, there are, and sometimes they refer to them as the chocolate phone, so you might be able to guess where the phone is hidden.
Oh, inside Willy Wonka.
Oh, right.
Is that his name?
Yeah. So,
Wow.
Wow.
So,
The chocolate.
yeah, and they can be very manipulative, because I remember one guy who was studying and doing well in education. He got regressed and got into a lot of trouble for having a phone in his cell. And there was a guy who was, running his drug business while he was still in jail. But what he would do is he'd attach the phone to a bit of dental floss, slide it back across to the other fella, and you have to keep that phone in your cell, or you're going to get bashed.
Oh.
And when there's a shakedown, you'll be the one caught with it, and they had the code of silence in there,
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, wow.
yeah, so
That's amazing.
yeah,
It's a lot of
it's very
intimidation.
interesting. Yeah.
Was it a privilege for them to be taught, or did they volunteer to be taught?
Yeah, so it is a privilege in jail, so they need to sort of show that they're going to do something and apply for some reason to do it, and their behaviour has to show that they could be in that situation.
Yeah, and trust
So,
them.
yeah, and often that's, a stepping stone, so somebody might have to get to that position, but in general, most people who'd come up wanted to learn something.
Yeah, I've only been through, I had a tour through one jail, and that was back in my hometown, but I knew someone that was behind the cell, and he was a really smart guy growing up, like A student, but he was behind bars, and I went to shake his hand, and I nearly got into so much trouble.
There's so much that you can and can't do when you're in there. And just the fact that... Did you know their crimes as well before you met them? So say, for example, you knew who you were sitting in the room with.
Yeah, well, one part of it, sort of being an education officer, was that people would apply to do certain courses because they could do external education as well.
Right.
So through uni or through TAFE.
Yeah.
So you had to know what some of their crimes are, because, one of the stories I talk about in the book is one guy was quite clever, and he wanted to study chemistry and pharmaceutical course.
Oh, cool.
And then, so I thought, that's good. And, he knew which uni he wanted to go to, and he sort of had all his ideas. And then when I checked his charges, he was in for manufacturing amphetamine.
Oh, no.
So he was a cook,
Oh, wow. So he wanted to get a degree for it.
He wanted to have a degree, so then he could be a doctor in it, I suppose. But,
he also needed a backup plan.
Oh, my gosh.
I wasn't doing
he had
that.
a backup plan for when he got out. So
No, I wasn't cooking
so
meth,
you
mate.
needed to... so he knew the chemistry behind it. So anyway, so you needed to know what their crimes were, and, of course, then sometimes you'd be sitting in there and, the person sitting next to you is a murderer or a rapist or, sex offender, and, you try to, in your mind say, well, they've been judged and whatever, and I'm here to do something else. But still, it's a little bit tricky.
Well, Paul, we could talk to you all day. Wow. Thank you so much for the wonderful chat about the criminal class, the memoir of a prison teacher. Thank you so much, Paul.
Thank you very much for having me, and it's been great to be on your show.